First hour after waking is the most critical period of your entire day. That may sound dramatic, but it's biologically accurate. The human brain and body don't just randomly wake up. They transition through a highly orchestrated sequence of neurochemical events. What you do during that first hour determines how efficiently those systems calibrate. It's not about motivation. It's not about willpower. It's about physiology. And if you respect that physiology, you can dramatically increase your energy, focus, and emotional stability across the entire day. When you first open your eyes, your brain is still transitioning out of what's called a high tau theta, low alpha wave state. It's a malleable, programmable zone, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making, planning, and regulating emotions, begins to come online. If you immediately expose yourself to chaos, notifications, loud environments, digital overstimulation, you're teaching your brain that reactivity is the default state. You're starting your day by letting the world program your mind before you've even had a chance to take control of it. But if instead you build structure into that first hour, you're sending a different signal. You're telling your nervous system that you're in control. That signal cascades into your endocrine system, your cognitive system, and your emotional state. Cortisol, which is often misunderstood as purely a stress hormone, naturally spikes in the morning. That's good. That cortisol pulse is supposed to be there. It's what helps us wake up and feel alert. But if you pair that natural cortisol rise with chaos and distraction, you amplify stress in ways that affect your performance for hours, even days. Instead, we want to anchor the first hour in stability. One of the best ways to do that is with light. Natural sunlight exposure within the first hour of waking is not just helpful, it's essential. Light hits the retina, which sends a signal to the brain's suprachiasmatic nucleus. That's your master circadian clock. That signal synchronizes all the clocks in your body, your hormones, your metabolism, your attention systems. This sets the timing for cortisol, dopamine, and melatonin for the next 24 hours. People who expose themselves to natural light early in the day report better sleep, lower anxiety, and greater ability to focus later in the day. This isn't theory, it's neurobiology. Movement is another lever. You don't need to hit a full workout, but deliberate movement, walking, stretching, even just getting the heart rate slightly elevated sends signals to the brain that it's time to be alert. It enhances norepinephrine and dopamine release, improving your ability to stay focused and resist distractions. Hydration plays a role too. During sleep, your body loses water through respiration and sweat. That dehydration creates a mild stress state that impacts cognition. Drinking 32 ounces of water first thing not only rehydrates, but also helps re-engage metabolic systems that were in low power mode during the night. But let's go deeper. This first hour isn't just about inputs. It's about guarding your brain from the wrong ones. When you reach for your phone before you even sit up in bed, you're activating what's called the mesolimbic dopamine system. That system is responsible for reward-seeking behavior. When it fires too early, it throws off your dopamine baseline. You start the day on a dopamine high from rapid scrolling, and your brain then spends the rest of the day chasing that same level of stimulation. That's why people feel burnt out, distracted, and mentally foggy by mid-afternoon. It's not just fatigue, it's chemical imbalance driven by poor first-hour habits. There's a better way. Use that first hour to design your trajectory. If you need stimulation, choose it consciously. Music, a walk, a few minutes of breath work or journaling. These inputs create a calm but alert state. They raise dopamine and acetylcholine gradually, giving you sustainable energy instead of a crash. Read for 10 minutes. Write a clear list of what you want to accomplish. Set one clear intention. These small acts signal to your frontal cortex that you are the architect of the day. And when your brain believes that, your stress reactivity lowers, your clarity improves, and your resilience builds over time. It's important to realize that these systems adapt. Your brain is constantly rewiring based on how you use it. If every day starts with chaos, your brain learns to expect and crave chaos. But if every day starts with order, calmness, and deliberate action, then your nervous system begins to wire itself for control, focus, and discipline. This is not about becoming perfect. It's about owning the first hour so the rest of the day doesn't own you. One of the most impactful things you can do in the first hour after waking is to align your behavior with what your biology actually needs. This isn't about motivation or discipline. It's about understanding how your nervous system primes itself for the day ahead. There are 3 powerful triggers that shape your brain and body during this early window: light, movement, and hydration. Each of these initiates cascades in the body that affect everything from mental clarity to emotional resilience, from hormone regulation to long-term focus. Let's start with light. The human brain evolved under very specific environmental conditions, and one of the most powerful is the presence of natural light in the early part of the day. When light enters your eyes, even through cloud cover, it activates a particular set of neurons in the retina that project to a region in the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This structure controls your circadian rhythms, essentially the internal 24-hour clock that influences your energy, sleep, mood, and alertness. Getting light within 30 to 60 minutes of waking isn't just a tip, it's a biological requirement. It triggers a healthy spike in cortisol, which helps you feel awake and alert, and it initiates the timer for melatonin release roughly 14 to 16 hours later, which is what helps you sleep deeply at night. Missing that early light exposure means you're starting your internal clock late, which delays everything downstream, including when you feel tired at night. And when that system is off even slightly, it throws off your hormonal balance, your appetite regulation, and your mood. The brain craves regularity, and this is one of the simplest, most effective ways to give it that. Even just 5 to 10 minutes of sunlight exposure in the morning, especially outside, is enough to reset your internal systems and build a foundation for cognitive clarity throughout the day. Now combine that light exposure with movement. Movement is not optional in the first hour. It's essential. It doesn't need to be intense. It just needs to be deliberate. A 5-minute walk, body weight mobility work, even slow stretching. These aren't just physical activities, they're neural activators. When you move, you stimulate mechanoreceptors in your muscles and joints. Those send feedback to your brainstem and activate alertness pathways, especially those involving norepinephrine and dopamine. These are neurochemicals responsible for energy, drive, and focus. Overstimulation, even mild physical activity early in the day, improves autonomic balance. The delicate interplay between your sympathetic nervous system, which drives alertness and action, and your parasympathetic nervous system, which calms and restores. Starting the day with movement helps establish a functional tone between these systems. You're more alert, but not wired. More focused, but not agitated. That's the sweet spot for optimal performance and decision making. Then there's hydration. Most people underestimate how dehydrated they are upon waking. You lose water throughout the night just by breathing, and even a 1-2% drop in hydration significantly reduces cognitive function, including attention, memory, and mood regulation. The brain is incredibly sensitive to hydration status. Drinking 16 to 32 ounces of water within the first 30 minutes of waking restores plasma volume, supports cellular energy production, and helps maintain blood flow to critical brain regions. Hydration is also a key modulator of the gastrointestinal system. It prepares your digestive system for the day, supports metabolism, and improves insulin sensitivity. Adding a pinch of sea salt or electrolytes can support mineral balance and further optimize neuronal activity. Think of it like charging a battery. Hydration is the conductor that allows electrical signals in your body to fire efficiently. Without it, every system runs slower. Now imagine these 3 working in harmony. You wake up, expose your eyes to natural light, move your body even briefly, and hydrate deeply. What you're doing is establishing the chemical, electrical, and hormonal environment for high performance. You're not guessing. You're not relying on mood or willpower. You're creating an internal setting that makes focus, energy, and discipline easier to access. And the reason this works is because it's how your biology is designed to operate. These are not hacks. These are foundational patterns that align with thousands of years of evolution. We are light-sensitive, movement-dependent organisms. The better we honor those truths in the first hour of the day, the more control we have over the rest of it. One of the most disruptive challenges we face in the early moments of our day is not what we do actively, but rather what we allow to invade that sacred period. The modern world is saturated with devices and stimuli that are designed to capture and hold our attention through bursts of dopamine. When you wake up and reach for your phone, you're not just checking a message or a notification. In that split second, you're giving in to a biological shortcut that hijacks your natural dopamine system. The brain is wired to reward us when we receive something novel or exciting. That anticipatory rush, fueled by the dopamine surge, feels momentarily satisfying and causes our attention to lock into a cycle of endless scrolling. But that initial spike doesn't fuel long-term focus. Rather, it undermines your brain's ability to sustain attention later on. When your first digital interaction becomes a battle for your brain's reward circuitry, the effects ripple outward throughout your day. Your dopamine system, sensitive to immediate gratification, becomes desensitized and requires ever more stimulation to achieve that fleeting moment of pleasure. Instead of starting your day with deliberate, purposeful energy, you find yourself caught in an automatic cycle that dictates your emotional and mental state. That initial dopamine hijack sets a tone of reactivity rather than deliberate action. By the time you're fully awake, you have already conditioned your brain to expect rapid-fire rewards and constant distraction. This misalignment impairs your ability to pursue meaningful long-term goals because the system that drives intrinsic motivation gets sidetracked by synthetic short-term inputs. It's not about demonizing technology or suggesting that you never use your smartphone. The point is to be intentional about your exposure during that critical first hour. Studies and accumulated anecdotal evidence indicate that structured behavior in the morning, free from digital disruptions, can protect and even enhance your dopamine balance. Calm, focused start helps to maintain a baseline dopamine level that sustains your energy and interest throughout the day. When you allow your brain to set its natural pace without immediate extrinsic rewards, you create a healthier rhythm for cognitive function, emotional resilience, and overall clarity. And consider the analogy of a delicate instrument. Your brain, particularly the dopamine system, requires careful tuning. If you overload it with intense sensory inputs immediately after waking, the instrument falls out of tune. Over time, constant exposure to rapid, high dopamine stimuli makes it more difficult for the instrument to perform subtle, refined tasks such as deep concentration or sustained creativity. Instead, when you consciously avoid those premature bursts of dopamine, you preserve the delicate balance necessary for peak performance. This isn't a call to complete abstinence from technology, but rather a reminder to prioritize what truly matters in the first hour of your day. It's also essential to recognize that this isn't solely about managing distractions. It's about actively choosing more rewarding alternatives. Instead of automatically diving into social media or checking emails, consider starting your day with activities that foster a healthier dopamine release. For example, spending a few minutes in meditation, journaling your thoughts, or even reading a physical book can shift your focus to introspection and deliberate learning. These activities not only help you control your dopamine levels, but they also allow you to set clear intentions for the day ahead. The key here is to replace habit-driven behavior with mindful, intentional practices that energize your mind without overwhelming it. In practical terms, it might mean placing your phone out of reach for the first 30 to 60 minutes after waking. This simple act creates a boundary that protects your cognitive space. It gives you the chance to perform actions that nourish rather than deplete your mental resources. Without that immediate barrage of notifications, you can start your day by naturally activating your cognitive and emotional reserves. You take back control over your attention instead of handing it over to pre-programmed apps designed to capture your focus. Over time, this practice has a cumulative effect. When you consistently shield your brain from that early dopamine hijack, you build resilience. Your capacity for sustained attention improves, And the natural rewards of purpose, achievement, and calm become far more valuable than the transient excitement generated by external stimuli. In the long run, you develop a more balanced and robust system for managing not only your biological functions, but also your emotional and cognitive well-being. This is a process of recalibration where the goal is not to eliminate pleasure, but to allow it to emerge from more meaningful and lasting experiences rather than quick, shallow bursts. Every morning offers a fresh start, a new opportunity to set the tone for the day. Instead of surrendering to the tempting allure of instant gratification, choose a path of mindful, intentional actions that honor your physiology. Let the early moments of your day be a time of clarity, purpose, and genuine readiness. By avoiding the early dopamine hijack, you protect your cognitive landscape, allowing your mind to build momentum in a constructive, sustainable way. We often underestimate the importance of what we allow into our minds in the first hour of the day. But the reality is that the brain doesn't just passively wake up and wait for direction. It's actively looking for patterns, for inputs, for signals that shape its operating state. The types of information, environments, and stimuli we consume in the early moments of the day have a disproportionate influence on our cognitive processing, memory formation, and emotional regulation. And if that early input is passive, meaning it's consumed without conscious effort or intention, then we're surrendering the steering wheel of the brain to external forces. There's a significant difference between passive consumption and deliberate input. Passive consumption happens when you scroll, watch, or absorb information without engaging any effort to reflect, organize, or question it. This mode conditions the brain to be reactive, scattered, and overstimulated. On the other hand, deliberate input is about intentional engagement with content that activates focus, analysis, or creativity. When you make deliberate choices about the content and activities you engage with first thing in the morning, you train your brain to operate from a place of intention rather than impulse. This matters because of how the brain handles information in the early morning. During the sleep cycle, your brain processes and consolidates memories. As you wake up, the hippocampus, your brain's memory center, is primed to encode new information. If you immediately flood it with disjointed, rapid-fire content from the outside world, you disrupt that natural encoding process. But when you start the day with focused inputs, things like journaling, reading something intellectually or emotionally meaningful, or planning your day with clarity, you're working with your brain's biology, not against it. Proper practices can have profound effects. Writing in a journal, for example, allows you to externalize thoughts and give structure to mental clutter. It enhances activity in the prefrontal cortex, which governs planning and impulse control. That one action alone improves your ability to focus throughout the rest of the day. It's not about writing perfectly or having profound insights. It's about taking what's internal and turning it into organized thought. When the brain sees its own thoughts in written form, it builds stronger neural circuits for self-regulation, decision-making, and future planning. Strategic learning is another valuable form of deliberate input. Reading a few pages of a book that challenges your thinking or teaches you something new engages the same neural networks responsible for critical thinking and mental resilience. You're telling your brain, this is how we use our focus. And the brain responds by reinforcing those circuits. The more often you start your day this way, the more automated that process becomes. Over time, it gets easier to access that focus state because you've conditioned your neural architecture to support it. An other benefit of deliberate input is that it creates a buffer between your internal state and the chaos of the external world. You're not starting your day reacting to news, notifications, or stress-inducing information. Instead, you begin from a place of centeredness. That initial state becomes your psychological anchor. Even when stress inevitably shows up later in the day, your baseline is stronger. You've already cultivated a frame of reference that's rooted in clarity and control, not anxiety and overload. This is how emotional resilience is built, not by avoiding stress altogether, but by establishing enough stability in the brain to handle it. That stability comes from early routines. A few minutes of mindfulness, intentional breathing, or simply reviewing your top goals for the day, these are not luxury habits. They are fundamental to optimizing how your brain allocates its energy and attention. You're training your nervous system to prioritize what's important and ignore what's irrelevant. The early morning brain is like a sponge. Whatever you soak it in becomes the foundation for the rest of your mental output. If you feed it distraction and noise, it learns to chase more of that. But if you give it purpose-driven input, it begins to seek out deeper focus, sustained thought, and meaningful actions. This isn't abstract. It's a neurological feedback loop. Every choice you make in the first hour trains your brain on what to expect for the rest of the day. Over time, the cumulative effect of this practice is transformative. You don't just become more productive, you become more mentally agile. Your ability to retain information, solve problems, and navigate emotional stress improves not because you're trying harder, but because you've aligned your habits with how the brain naturally functions. Deliberate input creates mental structure, and structure is the antidote to chaos.